The Thief and the Cobbler, animated film directed by Richard Williams, telling the story of a young, kind-hearted shoemaker saving the Arabic city and its princess from the machinations of an evil vizier and a horde of invaders. A film very similar to Disney's Aladdin, but I am not going to hold that against it, and I'll explain why, but in order to get there we'll have to start with the crazy story of this film's production. Essentially, it was the life's work, the Moby Dick of the animator Richard Williams, and it holds the record for the longest time between production on a movie started and when it was finally released. 28 years. It all first started in 1964 when Williams came up with the idea for the film based on an Arabic folktale. And what he wanted to do with it was very ambitious. In his perfectionism, he essentially intended for the film to be the best animated feature ever made. However, he was unable to even secure funding from neither private investors nor the major Hollywood studios. So he took up contracting jobs in other animated projects, Saturday cartoons, etc. And with the money that he earned, he would get from those, he would self-finance the work on The Thief and the Cobbler. The process was highly irregular. Sometimes the money would dry up and nothing would be done for months. Then the works would start again, and so on. It was also slowed down because Williams was a relentless perfectionist and he insisted that the quality of work be immaculate. He also preferred to use techniques of animation which were less automated and therefore much slower than could have been possible. And he insisted on making the film in 24 frames per second when the standard for hand-drawn animation at that time was 12 frames, which of course meant double the work. And on top of all of that, he was apparently not a big fan of storyboarding and would occasionally rewrite and change entire portions of the film, which meant chunks of animation were now useless or had to be redone from scratch. On and on it went until in 1988, Williams got recognition for his work on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Warner Brothers finally offered to step in and finance the completion of The Thief and the Cobbler. A contract was drawn up with 1991 as a deadline for the film's release. And then 1991 came and the movie was still far from being finished. The studio had little patience for this, especially with Disney working on a very similar film, Aladdin, which would eventually come out in 1992. So Warner Brothers hired the contracting company which in order to come in and finish the film. They immediately fired Williams and brought on another animator named Fred Calvert to finish the movie. Calvert was essentially a polar opposite of Williams in terms of work philosophy. He was known for bringing in projects on time and under budget, but the quality would often be pretty garbage. And with this film, he did exactly that. He heavily re-edited the movie, changed the storyline, cut out major parts of it. He of the stuff that was already animated. He added songs, he hired new voice actors who overdubbed the previously recorded lines, filled the blanks with cheaply made new animation, and in order to make the quality uniform, he even ordered that the already made 24 frame a second stuff have frames removed from it to scale them down to 12 in order to match the newly shot stuff. And some animators have estimated that doing that it actually ended up being more expensive than finishing the movie in the original frame rate would have been, which is almost insane. So this version of the film has finally been released in 1993 and was called The Princess and the Cobbler. And then Miramax, the American distributor, further cut the film down to 1 hour 12 minutes from around an hour and a half and released it under another title in America, Arabian Night. Now, apparently both those versions are pretty bad and have mostly been forgotten, even though they technically are the only legally available versions out there. However, Richard Williams was able to keep much of his original work print and has shown it a few times on special screenings. It was never released though to the wider public, mainly for legal reasons. He doesn't own most of the work now. But this is where we get to the point finally. In 2006, a group of people started a restoration effort on this film. They took the released versions, the original Williams work print. They also tracked down the unfinished drawings and materials which were meant to be used in the original vision of the film and created a bootleg version called The Thief and the Cobbler, the Recobbled Cut. It runs for around an hour and 40 minutes, restores the original voices and music, removes the new songs, uses the original animation wherever possible, and in some sequences fills the gaps with unfinished animation sequences or even black and white drawings, which were never animated at all. This is the version I ended up seeing, as it is probably the closest to what Richard Williams originally had in mind. And I have three main takeaways about it. First of all, it is genuinely a good film, if you can forgive the obvious shortcomings, like some scenes not actually being animated. Secondly, it was really interesting to experience. It was a really interesting experience to see this version of a film as a fan of filmmaking, because it's quite unique to see such a blend of finished and unfinished footage mixed together. In some ways, it made me think of some of the old 1920s movies, which I've seen restorations of. And it's almost like a look behind the scenes, a peek behind the curtain, which allows you to better understand the filmmaking and animation processes. And thirdly, I was quite amazed by how much ahead of his time Williams was in so many different ways. There are numerous things that the film does which made me think, oh, I saw that elsewhere, before realizing, oh, but he has actually done it first. The most obvious thing, of course, is the storyline and its similarities to Aladdin. The protagonist, the king and the princess, the vizier and his evil bird, these characters are almost the same in both movies. Even the looks of them are quite similar, so is a lot of the plot. And so, the success of Aladdin really makes you wonder how popular The Thief and the Cobbler might have been if it was actually released first. And then there's tons of smaller stuff. The thief character and his role in the plot resembles the little rat chasing his nut in all of the Ice Age animated movies, entertaining hijinks which seem to be completely to the side of the story but end up actually impacting it quite heavily at points. The evil warlord, which looks like characters from the Samurai Jack animated series, very much resembles that style of drawings. Some of the trippy psychedelic sequences play with color in a similar way to the later adult animation. And then there's stuff which just works on its own. The whole war machine sequence at the end, the giant Rube Goldberg machine with the thief right in the middle of it, it's just nothing short of genius on its own. I also want to mention how creative the movie is in terms of playing with perspective and different planes. The villain is very interesting. Maybe not interesting, but entertaining is a better word. The hero's likable, the thief funny. And all in all, watching it was kind of like going to an attic and discovering some old, unassuming book that everyone in the house forgot about, and realizing it's actually a great read, even though it has been kind of lost to time. I do think that a lot of people would be turned off by its unfinished nature, but for me it was just another interesting aspect of it. So if you're kind of interested in movie and animation history, this is an absolute must to check it out. Just remember to see the recobbled cut, according to Richard Williams' son, who has seen both of the official releases. Those are not good and not in any way representative of his father's vision.